The history of the American West is filled with color and drama, and Nevada has contributed many gripping tales. Yet often overlooked is the compelling chronicle of the workers who gave of themselves to transform the dreams of others into powerful realities. Our mission is to connect all of us with these inspiring human stories. Our first program honored the miners on the Comstock who wrestled silver ore out of the ground and created vast fortunes for others. In our second program, we traveled to remote Goldfield to capture a labor vision of a new world order confronting the status quo. For our third program, we'll visit Southern Nevada, where Las Vegas is celebrating the 100th anniversary of its founding, and where, in nearby historic Boulder City, Nevada AFL-CIO members gathered at the old-time Boulder Theater for another chapter of Might is Right. They died to make the desert bloom, through the eyes of labor historian Guy Rocha.
Las Vegas, the entertainment mecca of the world, an oasis in the desolate Mojave Desert. Yet for decades, it wasn't much more than a watering hole, a spring on a major trading and immigrant route. A few farmers and ranchers eked out a bare existence until the building of the last transcontinental railroad link spawned the humble town in 1905. Nearby to the east roared the mighty Colorado River, running roughshod over the face of the Southwest, just as it had for eons, carving the Grand Canyon with its raging torrents and periodically spilling over its banks, flooding the desert. The river ran untamed until a growing region demanded flood control and water and hydroelectric power to feed surging development. And so it came to pass, the construction of a monumental concrete impediment on the Arizona-Nevada border, Hoover Dam. America's modern-day pyramid and engineering wonder of the world, the building of the Great Dam stimulated the local economy, and with Nevada's legalization of casino gambling in 1931, ultimately transformed Las Vegas into a world-class resort city. However, as in the building of pyramids in ancient Egypt, the damming of the Colorado in the early 1930s took its toll. Courageous workers, toiling in the worst of economic times, faced terrifying conditions, unbearable heat, and management indifference. A number of them, sometimes even family members who lived near the inhospitable dam site, paid the ultimate price. As Las Vegas celebrates its 100th birthday, we honor the thousands injured and the hundreds who perished during the construction of Hoover Dam. By 1918, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation planned to tame the treacherous Colorado and distribute its water over large portions of the Southwest. While survey work advanced to find a suitable dam site, the struggling community of Las Vegas reeled from the outcome of the 1922 National Railroad strike. The railroad town had openly sided with the union workers, who faced major wage reductions. The Union Pacific punished Las Vegas following the union's defeat, moving the railroad facilities, the lifeblood of the town, to Caliente, 150 miles to the northeast. Las Vegas was searching for a future. The Desert Rest Stop placed its hopes on the building of a gigantic dam on the lower Colorado River. The passage of the Boulder Canyon Project Act in December 1928 and newly elected President Herbert Hoover authorizing the dam construction in Black Canyon in June 1929 gave Las Vegas new life and laid the foundation for a future the town's founders could never have imagined. Las Vegas was still celebrating its good fortune when the stock market crashed in October. The long slide into the Great Depression began, and the trickle of workers drifting into Las Vegas soon became a deluge. The town, the federal government, and the building contractors were unprepared for the thousands of men, women, and children who had inundated the area by 1931. Many families found their way to the aptly named community of Ragtown near Black Canyon. There were no sanitary facilities, homes were made from scrap materials, and water came directly from the silt-laden Colorado. As the blistering summer heat enveloped the ragtag camp numbering some 1,400 souls, people sickened and some died. In the meantime, the Hoover administration had decided to rush the construction of the dam, knowing that housing and other amenities for the workers and their families in Boulder City, the proposed federal town, would not be completed until later in the year. Unfairly blamed for the Depression, President Hoover needed positive press. He reasoned that employing thousands in the construction of Hoover Dam would alleviate the unemployment in Las Vegas and elsewhere in the country. Dr. Elwood Mead, Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation, described the brutal conditions near the dam site. The summer wind, which sweeps over the gorge from the desert, feels like a blast from a furnace. At the rim of the gorge, where most of the work must be done, there is neither soil, grass, nor trees. The sun beats down on a broken surface of lava rocks. At midday, they cannot be touched with the naked hand. It is bad enough as a place for men to work. It is no place for a boarding house or a sleeping porch. Meade and other members of the Hoover administration were clearly aware of the killing heat, yet they assumed that the men and their families could somehow survive the first summer without suffering much loss of life. It would prove to be a terrible mistake in judgment. Meade optimistically predicted next year there will be an entirely different story. Work began on Hoover Dam in April 1931 after the U.S. Department of the Interior awarded the contract to a consortium of construction firms known as Six Companies, Inc. Initially, 800 workers swarmed in and around Black Canyon, many of them soon digging the 4 massive diversion tunnels to divert water around the dam site to dry the area after the building of cofferdams. The date of October 1st, 1933 loomed large for 6 companies. If the river was not diverted around the dam site by that day, the consortium would be fined $3,000 for every day past the deadline. The industrial workers of the world, the once feared Wobblies, noticed the construction of Hoover Dam was underway. Hoping to breathe new life into the moribund radical labor union, IWW headquarters in Chicago sent organizers to Las Vegas. Situated some 30 miles from the dam site, the booming town of more than 5,000 would serve as a base of operations. The organizers were then to hire on with 6 companies and other contractors, solicit membership on the non-union job, and agitate for better conditions. Frank Desmond Anderson headed up the IWW organizational drive. Anderson arrived in Las Vegas in early May and proceeded to the project, where he obtained a job at the river camp as a truck tender. The workers at the camp were housed in crude wooden dormitories similar to Army barracks. Perched precariously on the canyon wall at Cape Horn, the river bend just above the dam site, the camp had no showers, forcing laborers to bathe in the Colorado. Drinking water was drawn from the river, stored in large tanks, and with no water coolers, it was tepid or hot. As temperatures increased, the water, with its high bacteria count, made the workers sick. The growing number of injuries and deaths related to poor working conditions outraged Anderson and other Wobblies on the project. One impassioned Wobbly, recalling the many casualties incurred in an earlier public works project and the statue erected in memory of the fallen workers, pleaded with the men to choose between a red Union card and a statue at Hoover Dam commemorating dead comrades. The IWW publicized the hazardous situation as a job speed-up in its national weekly publications. In Las Vegas, Wobbly sold their newspapers on downtown street corners, in front of casinos, and smuggled them into the Boulder City and river camps on the federal reservation. The IWW hoped that workers would join the radical union by dramatizing the deplorable housing and working conditions and advocating a 6-hour day to reduce the workload and employ more men. 26 employees died on the dam project between May and July, mainly from heat prostration, yet workers did not flock to join the IWW. They feared joining a union, especially a union with the IWW's reputation, on an open shop job in the midst of the nation's worst depression and thousands of unemployed men begging for any work that could be found. As frightful and scary as this place was, the workers felt they had little choice. This was their future, and they knew it. Despite the fact that the workers weren't joining the IWW, the Las Vegas local found itself under siege. A headline in the Las Vegas Age proclaimed, "IWW Group at Dam Revealed." On July 10th, Deputy Sheriff Eddie Johnson, a part-time Boulder Club bouncer, arrested Frank Anderson, who was selling IWW newspapers in front of the downtown casino. The charge was vagrancy. A quote attributed to Anderson read that he forecast Wobbly control of Boulder City, then under construction, enrolled 21 members in 1 month, and boasted of 300 laborers as IWW members. Further, the article stated that the labor union's objective was to organize enough workers to call a general strike. The IWW countered the exaggerated claims, stating that its primary purpose was not to call a strike at the dam, but to organize and represent the workers. A strike would be called only if management refused to negotiate. The following morning, 2 more organizers were arrested in Las Vegas on vagrancy charges. local officials approached the U.S. Attorney's Office about prosecuting the Wobbly cases. The response was swift and emphatic. No government action would be forthcoming unless overt acts were committed on the federal reservation or construction of the dam delayed by disruptive union activities. Although the federal government maintained a neutral stand, the pronouncement was a harbinger of events to come. Saturday night witnessed a roundup of 5 Wobblies selling IWW newspapers in front of the Boulder Club. All 8 Wobblies were incarcerated in the drunk tank, which lacked adequate bedding and had no air conditioning. The police chief tried to force 2 of the IWW prisoners to work on a road gang. When the men refused on the grounds they had not been convicted of a crime, the police chief withheld food from all Wobblies for the rest of the day. Monday morning saw the 8 men arraigned in municipal court. They pleaded not guilty to the vagrancy charges and declared they were going to stand upon their constitutional rights and demand jury trials. The judge postponed the hearing to Wednesday. In the meantime, Wobblies, exercising their free speech rights in defiance of local authorities, continued to sell IWW newspapers on the streets of Las Vegas. 3 more men were arrested on vagrancy charges and jailed with their fellow union members. The 11 Wobblies were separated from other prisoners and given no food. The police prevented all union efforts to provide the incarcerated men with something to eat. City officials also directed the Western Union office to delay a telegram to IWW national headquarters, which sought assistance for the jailed members. The heavy-handed suppression of the Wobblies and the denial of a jury trial by the city attorney appeared to set the stage for big trouble at the July 15th hearing. The American Civil Liberties Union in New York City sent a telegram to Nevada Governor Fred Balzar protesting the action of Las Vegas authorities in arresting the IWW members. Balzar refused to intervene, stating that he had full confidence in the city and county officials. The hearing opened with the city attorney calling Deputy Sheriff and casino bouncer Eddie Johnson as a witness. The prosecutor questioned Johnson about Frank Anderson's arrest at the Boulder Club. Johnson testified that he saw Anderson at the casino several times in July, heard him criticize working conditions at the dam site, and observed him selling IWW publications outside the club on the night of his arrest. In the cross-examination, the attorney for the Wobblies asked Johnson about the vagrancy charge. Did Johnson know that Anderson was an IWW organizer and paid $28 a month? He said no. Had Johnson ever read the radical newspapers Anderson was selling? No. Why then was Anderson arrested? Asked the defense attorney. Johnson replied, because my boss told me to. After all, who was Eddie Johnson to disobey the command of Glenn Bud Bodell, his employer, and his Clark County Chief Deputy Sheriff, his boss? Not surprisingly, the prosecutor's effort to discredit Frank Anderson on the stand failed. The following morning, the municipal judge dismissed the vagrancy charges against Anderson and, on motion of the city attorney, dropped the charges against the 10 other jailed Wobblies. IWW members soon resumed organizing activities and selling newspapers. They knew to expect more harassment from local law enforcement. Still, the Wobblies were heartened by their court victory and the U.S. Attorney's decision to remain neutral. The Las Vegas Central Labor Council now recognized the IWW Construction Workers Local and invited a delegate to address its next meeting. The Wobbly's success in Las Vegas and their ongoing efforts to publicize the plight of the workers on the dam project influenced 6 companies to upgrade conditions. By early August, with 1,400 employees working 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week, the construction company installed cooling systems in the bunk and cookhouses at the Boulder City Camp, at the River Camp's cookhouse, and moved the powder room at the dam site to the Arizona side of the river from its previous location 30 feet from the blacksmith shop. The use of gasoline as a cleaning fluid ceased after a series of explosions and fires burned several workers. Drinking water was transported from Las Vegas to the river camp, although the Wobblies complained there was not enough, and the new Frigidaire water cooler at the cookhouse could not keep up with the demand for cold water. When it came to the brutal summer heat of 1931, there was nothing the IWW, 6 companies, or the federal government could do to address the major cause of problems at the dam site. Temperatures ran 12 degrees above normal according to official weather records. By the end of July, the average daily temperature was almost 120 degrees, and the average nightly temperature was 95 degrees. Women and children were dying in Ragtown. Many laborers were incapacitated and 13 died. The heat in the diversion tunnels often exceeded outside temperatures, and the air, choked with carbon monoxide from trucks and other vehicles, were bringing the men down. It wasn't until the summer of 1932 that the use of salt tablets was required on the job after a study determined that extreme dehydration was the cause of the heat prostration. Temperatures and tempers were at a flashpoint on August 7th when 6 companies ordered a wage reduction for men working in the diversion tunnels. The IWW claimed 180 workers were impacted, while 6 companies argued that only 30 workers were affected by the introduction of new power equipment to assist in the shoveling of broken rock in the tunnels. Upset by the wage cut, the swing shift workers met the day crew coming off work and held an impromptu meeting. IWW members exhorted the men to go out on strike. It was agreed to hold a meeting at the River Camp Mess Hall. After the speakers roundly denounced 6 companies at the River Camp meeting, the 400 workers in attendance voted unanimously to strike. The laborers then elected a committee to draft demands and traveled to the Boulder City camp and convinced workers there to join the walkout. After hearing of the wage reduction, the 600 men squeezed into the Boulder City Mess Hall. They voted overwhelmingly to join the strike and create a committee to work with the River Camp Committee in drafting demands and presenting them to 6 companies superintendent Frank Crow. With no graveyard shift to continue work at the dam site, Black Canyon fell strangely silent. The first and only major labor management dispute on the Boulder Canyon project had begun. On August 8th, the 2 Las Vegas newspapers featured banner headlines announcing the strike. The labor unrest even made the front page of the New York Times. Superintendent Crow, when interviewed by the Las Vegas Age, argued that the protest would have little effect on the project, was largely a result of IWW agitation, and that the company would be glad to get rid of such. The strike committees disassociated themselves from the Wobblies, saying, "We wish to make it plain that the strike has nothing to do with the IWWs or the United Mine Workers. It is a matter distinctly among the workmen on this project. We're not Wobblies, and we don't want to be classed as such." Just the same, Crow took the strike as a personal betrayal and a threat to an amazing $300,000 bonus promised him if the project came in before deadline. Crow received the strike demand Saturday morning, canceled the pay cut, and raised the minimum daily wage for tunnel workers from $5 to $5.50, for laborers outside the tunnels from $4 to $5, and for skilled workers such as miners and carpenters from $5.60 to $6. An 8-hour day, including the time from camp to work site and return to camp. Workers be supplied with ice water until drinking fountains dispensing cold water were installed. Rates for 3 meals in the mess halls to cost $1.50 per day. Improve the sanitary conditions at the river camp, including flush toilets. Construct change rooms at the portals of the diversion tunnels so the workers could change their clothes before returning to camp. Station a safety miner at each tunnel heading to provide assistance to injured workers. Obey all Nevada and Arizona mining safety laws. And rehire all striking workers. 24 hours later, Hurry Up Crow, as the disgruntled workers called him because of the job speed-up, responded to the demands by closing down the project. He refused to negotiate and ordered the strikers to vacate the federal reservation. Crow told reporters, "We are 6 months ahead of schedule on the work now, and we can afford to refuse concessions which could cost $2,000 daily." William H. Wattis, president of 6 companies in San Francisco, echoed Crow's repudiation of the strikers' demands. "They're not going to tell us what to do. They will work under our conditions or not at all." 1,200 workers heard the message loud and clear, picked up their paychecks, and headed to Las Vegas in hopes of being rehired when the strike ended. Sunday's harsh rebuke was followed by strike breakers traveling to the river camp on Monday morning to remove the remaining strikers found there. The men, including an IWW organizer, were rounded up at gunpoint and loaded into company trucks. Fortunately for the laborers, a deputy U.S. Marshal arrived on the scene, ordered the vehicles unloaded, and arrested 1 strike breaker for carrying a weapon. The deputy marshal told the strikers that 6 companies had no authority to move them without a warrant. The strike committee then sent a telegram to U.S. Secretary of Labor William Doak. "As American citizens, we ask protection on Hoover Dam in case of deportation." Strike called in protest of wage cuts. However, word soon arrived that the federal project construction engineer, Walker Young, had alerted troops at Fort Douglas, Utah, to be prepared to travel to the Hoover Dam site on short notice if government property were threatened. Events turned ominous on Tuesday, August 11th, when at an evening meeting held in Boulder City, Young ordered the strikers to vacate the federal reservation by 8 a.m. the following day. The next morning, Young, U.S. Marshal Jacob Fulmer, and Assistant U.S. Attorney George Montrose proceeded to the river camp where some 200 strikers, including the wobbly contingent, were holding out. Young, after thanking the workers for not resorting to violence, directed the men to clear the reservation and offered government trucks to take them to Las Vegas. Red Williams, the head of the strike committee, told the workers to heed Young's request in order to avoid a call for federal troops. However, Williams reassured the men that the strike was not over. The remaining strikers established Camp Stand, 8 miles southeast of Las Vegas on the Boulder City Highway, where they picketed the reservation. The Las Vegas Central Labor Council openly supported the strikers. The Trades Council sent a scathing resolution to 6 companies, to William Green, AFL President, Governor Balzar, and the Las Vegas newspapers. We believe the 6 companies are simply taking advantage of the depression throughout the country and of a mob of broke and hungry men to establish wage scales that are entirely unreasonable. We know the conditions complained of by the employees of the 6 companies are the true conditions, that the officials of the 6 companies endeavor to create alibis and excuses for their shortcomings and wind up telling the press and the public that it was only the dissatisfaction of a few IWWs that was the cause of the tie-up. We feel it is a crime against humanity to ask men to work in that hellhole of heat they encounter at Boulder Dam and do it for a mere pittance. The council requested Green to submit the resolution to Bureau Reclamation Commissioner Meade, Secretary of Labor Doak, and President Hoover. The resolution fell on deaf ears. The present wage rate on Hoover Dam is considerably above the surrounding region, Meade replied. He characterized the strike demands as impossible. Doak followed suit when he argued that the Boulder Canyon project does not come within the provisions of the prevailing rate law. At 12 noon, August 13th, Walker Young ordered 6 companies to hire laborers and resume work. The wage reduction that produced the strike remained in effect. Deputy Nevada Labor Commissioner Leonard Brudd briefly opened a branch of the Las Vegas State Federal Employment Office at the reservation's entrance near Railroad Pass to hire new crews. Federal authorities then placed a large gate across the Boulder City Highway to prevent any unauthorized person from entering the project area. U.S. Marshal Fulmer followed up the action by deputizing 20 reclamation engineers to guard the gate and police the area. When asked by the Las Vegas Age if the rumors that semi-martial law had been established, Deputy U.S. Attorney Montrose obliquely remarked, "It may be called semi-martial law, only in that Marshal Fulmer has complete control over reservation conditions." By August 14th, 700 old worthy laborers, as Superintendent Crow called them, had crossed the picket line at Camp Stand and resumed working. The workers were housed in Boulder City as the river camp dormitories were being upgraded as a result of the strike. The remaining 200 strikers, including the wobbly contingent at Camp Stand, were desperately struggling to sustain the strike. "We are not beaten," the strike committee announced after Young's order to resume construction, "and we consider men returning to work as strike breakers. The strike is still on, and we intend to stick it out until it is settled." On the afternoon of August 14th, the strikers and more than 600 curious spectators jammed the Las Vegas Air Dome Theater and listened to militant speakers charge that the Hoover Dam strike was the focal point of the entire class struggle at the present time, and that the federal government had betrayed its neutral stand to support 6 companies. One angry striker shouted, "Are we going out now to where these fellows are going back to work as strike bakers and take a shillelagh and beat the ears off the guys? Or are we going to say, 'Please, mister'?" However, the strike committee was determined to avoid violence and proposed the pickets be posted on all major highways, at the Las Vegas bus station, at Camp Stand, and outside the reservation gate. Unemployed workers were to be recruited into the ranks of the strikers, fundraising campaigns inaugurated, and publicity efforts pursued to focus national attention on the strike. In a final effort to get government intervention, the strike committee sent Governor Balzar a telegram notifying him the strike was still on, the 6 companies were employing strike breakers, and that the strikers wanted an investigation. Balzar responded on August 15th. State of Nevada absolutely neutral in all labor disputes. Matter should properly be referred to the Department of Labor, Washington. Lacking any government support, the committee proposed a vote on August 16th to end the strike. Camp Stand, now called Camp Despair by the local newspapers, witnessed a vote of 68 to 50 in favor of returning to work. Those opposed were mostly Wobblies. 9 days after it began, the strike was over. Superintendent Crow announced the following day that all former strikers known to carry red cards and bear a reputation as agitators would not be rehired. A Wobbly responded, "Red cards are on the Boulder Dam today and will continue to be there until the project is finished. Maybe, Mr. Crow, red cards may organize the Boulder Dam to strike, not as an unorganized body as was the present case, but as an unshakable union that will not be intimidated by company arsenals or company gunmen." In fact, 6 companies and the federal government were now working together to keep the Wobblies off the project reservation. Bud Bodell, Chief Deputy Sheriff and the owner of the Boulder Club, who had ordered IWW organizer Frank Anderson's arrest in July, was appointed a Deputy U.S. Marshal and Boulder City's police chief. With the heat abating as summer turned to fall, one of the most compelling issues related to labor strife on the project, the dreadful living conditions at the River Camp and Ragtown, was eliminated with the opening of housing tracts in Boulder City. The Wobblies maintained their construction workers local in Las Vegas, held conventions in the desert town, and continued to criticize conditions at the dam site through its publications. However, the short-lived August strike was a mortal blow in their effort to breathe new life into the union. The last IWW attempt to organize the dam workers to strike was on August 16, 1933. Frank Anderson and other Wobblies sneaked onto the federal reservation, began distributing handbills with strike demands, and exhorted the workers at the Boulder City Mess Hall to make a showdown with the 6 companies by remaining off shift. Even though the workers were ignoring the call for a strike, Bud Bodell physically assaulted and arrested the IWW members. Arriving on the scene, Superintendent Crow ordered the radicals released, fed them breakfast, and then had them removed from the reservation without pressing charges. The Las Vegas newspapers called the aborted strike a dismal failure, and some 20 years later, a Wobbly historian would claim that it was the only time in IWW history that it called a strike, and none developed. Wobblies continued to work on the dam when President Franklin D. Roosevelt dedicated it on September 30th, 1935, and until shortly before its official completion on March 1st, 1936, 2 years ahead of schedule. Ironically, the Wobbly who in May 1931 described the IWW's organizational drive at the Boulder Canyon Project in terms of the workers choosing between a red union card and a statue proved to be a prophet of sorts. Most laborers never joined the IWW, but the 108 project employees who died constructing Hoover Dam received their monument. Inscribed with the words, "They died to make the desert bloom," the monument commemorates a sizable number of workers who needlessly perished as a result of a hasty political decision. We cannot undo the past, but what we can do today is pay special tribute to those workers who died to make the desert bloom. Thank you.